93, 93, 93. This is Amon Asherenew from asherenew.com. We back in here, as usual. So we're going to play a little theme music, of course, before we get into the actual topics here. So kick back and relax. Here we go. Hopefully everybody is good. And if you are not good, hopefully you are better by the end of this live stream, right? So least we can do here. Just adjust this slightly. Push this in. Yeah, this is good. All right, salute, incognito. Salute. So let me speed this up. We're just doing a couple transitions before we get started.
Perfect where I dwell, wearing that ring of the genie. Surrounded in cloaks, she can't see thee. That 93, my philosophy. Them inner stars of geography. I'm invoking them sacred names. Level my mental, reversing planes. Infamous, fuck all that clout and fame. The Kiyama, I set the whole world aflame. 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 Captain Soul, I transcend with my energy. Noah's Ark and I speak metaphysically. Underworld, you know who that ruler be. Hello Cyrus, I resurrect sexually. Others listen, the chosen receive it. That's because their true soul is vampiric. 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 That's because their true soul is vampiric.
That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true.
What's up, esoteric alchemist? Or alchemistic rather. I see you. Respect to you. Salute to the gods. Salute to the earth. You already know. So a special shout out for everybody who supported. You know, the little half off sale I had the past couple days on the website. Everything was half off for about 3 days. So salute to everybody who supported. I was able to push out all those orders, so everything is caught up, everything is good. So that's why I'm here now, putting out content. So we back. So of course, I'm going to speak about the new moon because we just passed through the new moon within the last 24 hours. So we're going to do some detailed analysis as to what is occurring for the new moon, give everybody a little insight to what's going on. So that's why I had the iPad ready to go. The iPad is ready to go, so I'm going to start doing these equations in just a second. So let's just go ahead and finish out the theme song and we get to it.
That's because their true soul is vampiric. That's because their true soul is vampiric. Way before Vedic, Dravidic. Look at that, that's a satiric. Pray to holy creams like the Sufis. Grab the pen, I'm scribing on loose sleeves. As I chief, I advance in the far deep. Call the spirits that rose from the concrete. Christ heard it through like a Gnostic. Lay my true eyes on the prophets. Don't separate, we composite. Aeon of the Gothics. The demisphere, I illuminate. That scholarship, I sophisticate. I step foot towards the middle gate. I alternate between conscious state. Found victory while in the Zack. Couple magic swords, plus some druid hats. That holy cat with the candle axe. The myth the back, hidden in our ass. 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 The myth the back, hidden in our
All right. Let me pull up the screen here. So let me go ahead and draw the scales out here. Let me draw this chart out so we get into it here. Give me a second. I want to be very careful. Let me turn that back. There we go. Now let's see if I can draw this out. All right. Line through here. Line right there. Line right there. All right. I'll put a line here. Line here. Line here. All right. Let me go ahead and fill in the zodiac here. So the first thing we notice is the moon was in Aries. So we'll go ahead and do it this way. The moon was conjunct the sun. So the sun and the moon had a conjunction in Aries, specifically 11 degrees western, which means that the sun and moon were in the second decan of Aries. Let me go ahead and use the normal pen here. So the second decan of Aries is a combination of the sun and Aries, so that we understand the energy, otherwise known as the Three of Wands. Right? So when it comes to the sun and moon, they were conjunct in the Three of Wands. So in order to uncover what's actually occurring here, we must decode the Three of Wands. So because we are dealing with the Kabbalah, the numerology is slightly different, as we know the 3 would normally take us to Jupiter. However, Kabbalistically, the 3 takes us to Bina. Bina corresponds to Saturn. So now, and we also must take into consideration the wands, which takes us to the fire world. So the world of fire, within the world of fire, we are in the Sephira of Bina, which is the vortex of Saturn. So we have a combination of earth and fire. Earth plus fire, otherwise known as a upward triangle and a downward triangle with a line across. Probably can draw that a bit better. Hold on. So an upward triangle, downward triangle with a line, that represents a combination of earth and fire. So we have energy ascending upward and energy descending downward, as air and fire ascend upward and earth and water ascend downward. All right. So because we are in the world of fire, or the archetypal plane, and within this archetypal plane, we are occupying the Sephira, or vortex of Saturn. And Saturn, as we know, is the dark sun. All right, the planet of mathematics. As well as astrology. Traditionally, as Saturn ruled over Aquarius and Capricorn. We know currently Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. However, before the discovery of Uranus, Aquarius was occupied by Saturn. So not only does Saturn represent the world stage, it also represents mathematics as well as astrology, because to properly operate on the world stage, you must have what? Timing, right? As we call the clock, the punching in and out of the clock. What's up, 305 Capricorn? Peace to you. Peace, peace. All right. Okay, let me see that my face is kind of in the way here. So let me move my face up here. Yeah, that should be better. So we can see what's going on. All right. So during this new moon cycle, for the next 2 weeks, going into the full moon, we are occupying the archetypal plane, or the world of fire. Within that archetypal plane, we are dealing within the vortex of Saturn. Saturn, as we know, rules over Capricorn as well as Aquarius traditionally, which represents mathematics and astrology, which is mathematics, you can say, is world time. You got world time, then you have star time. Astrology just represents star time. So, as we know, most people deal with this, punching in the clock, timing, which is the energy of Capricorn. Then the others deal with the astrological alignments, which is the planetary timing, which is more connected with Aquarius, right? All right, let me move this as well. So my face keep getting in the way of these things. There we go. Hey Asha, I'm always watching your videos, work 2 jobs, so I'm mostly in the background listening to your live. Well, as you know, 305 Capricorn, that's why you're the Capricorn. There we go. The workaholic, right? So we already know that's the energy of Saturn. And Saturn is basically the heaviest planet, right? So that's why Saturn has such a dominant influence on the planet, because of its heaviness. Saturn isn't necessarily the largest planet, right? We know the largest planet is actually Jupiter. But the heaviest planet is Saturn. So even though Saturn is smaller, it has more weight, meaning it has a more dominant role on the world dynamics, or as we call government and politics, as Saturn will represent government and politics, or the 10th house, right? What's up, Kay? What's up, Kay? What's up? So, as we know, this is why I'm always taking the time to explain these things. As the deeper we get into these secrets, the deeper we understand not only ourselves, but the world around us, as everything is influenced by the planetary alignments, whether we realize it or not. So, that's why I want to do a little bit more illustrating, because me just talking about this stuff is I'm not going to be able to go as deep as we need to go if I'm just running my mouth. Because as you see, the equations start to get pretty complex. So if I'm just running my mouth, it's like it ain't too many people that can do all this in their head and keep everything precise and right and exact. So that's why we want to write it out, so that we have the full picture and the full scope of what we're actually dealing with here. So as we continue, because we are in the archetypal plane, or the plane of the dark sun, and the dark sun wants us to become aware of planetary timing as well as the world time. So the world time is essentially discipline. That's what makes a person disciplined, because they got their timing. They know when to be at a place. They know how to be on time. So we basically just say on time. Saturn is all about being on time. Right? So as long as you are on time, based on the clock, the 24-hour clock or the 12-hour clock, as long as you are on time, you can maintain a job, right? You can maintain your livelihood. Essentially, you can maintain your survival as long as you are on time. The same way we want our money to come on time, you want your check to come on time, you want to get paid on the day that you get paid. That's all about timing. So as long as timing is on point, you see everything is good. Everything operates as it should in terms of the systematic matrix, because Saturn also will represent the matrix. And we see the matrix is all about timing, being on time, being in position as well. So in position. So that's why it's not just about the right time, it's also about the right place. They say the right place at the right time, right? So there we go. The right place at the right time. Right place, right time. Let me write that down. Right place, right time. So that's Saturn. So as long as you can fulfill being at the right place at the right time, you're pretty much good. As we know, Aquarius actually represents the complete opposite, which we see here. Because Aquarius is the rebel. Aquarius represents revolt. So Aquarius is all about being off the clock. Or as we like to call, off the grid. Off the clock, off the grid. Make sure everybody can see what I'm doing here. Move my face. There we go. So as we see, right place at the right time, Saturn. However, to be off the clock or off the grid represents the energy of Aquarius. So how does Saturn represent Capricorn and Aquarius if they are opposites? If Capricorn represents being on time, then Aquarius represents off time. Then what is the common denominator? The common denominator, as we see, is Saturn. So what does Saturn have to do with being on the clock as well as being off the clock? What's up, Sounds by Luna? Salute to you, salute. So what we see here is, being that Saturn is the common denominator, that means Saturn has something to do with timing on a world level, but also on the astrological level. So Saturn brings both of these concepts together. So when we are speaking about planetary timing as well as worldly timing, this is why Saturn deals with Bina, which we see over here. So the key to Saturn is Bina, which is on the left pillar in the Kabbalah. So the Kabbalistic left pillar. let's put it here, left pillar, which is the negatively charged pillar. Left pillar, which is negatively charged. So we'll just call it negativity. Or the feminine force. As the right pillar is the masculine force. So the left pillar deals with severity. So this is the pillar of hardship, severity. Whereas the masculine pillar is the pillar of mercy, right? So whenever we're dealing with mercy and blessings or the energy of Jupiter, that's more so the right pillar. However, when we're dealing with the left pillar, we're more so dealing with the attributes of Saturn. Again, which is all about being right and exact. Saturn is all about exactness. That's why Saturn represents mathematics. So it ain't about being accurate or close enough. It's about being right and exact. You want to get paid exactly the amount of work you put in. It has to be right and exact. It can't be approximate, right? So this is Saturn. Saturn is not about being approximate. It's about being exact. You want to get paid for the exact work you do, not approximately, right? So that same right and exactness we apply on the world stage, when we apply that on the planetary stage, this is why new moons become relevant. This is why full moons are relevant. Spring equinoxes, right? Winter solstice, right? Seasonal magic, daily magic. This is why all these things become relevant, because we are now applying the planetary timing, which influences our psyche. All planetary forces influence our psyche, which is called the collective unconscious, which links everybody together. So it is the planets that actually link all of us together, because we are all, you can say, miniature planets. So let me delete all this, start up more lines. All right, I'm going all over the place with this. So let me go ahead and move my face out the way. What's up, Immortal 72? Peace, God. Peace, God. Let me move that there. All right. So once again, we are in the realm of the Three of Wands. Three, once again, Bina. Wands at Salute. Bina in at Salute. Fire. Earth. Bina, Saturn. All right. So we see it's all equations at the end of the day. So everybody who didn't like math, you probably prefer this method because this is more Aquarian. As astrology, as we know, is ruled by Aquarius. So once again, Saturn is mathematics. So that's why let me draw all of this up for you. So if Saturn is mathematics, we have traditional mathematics, but then we have extra mathematics. We'll just call it extra. That's astrology. Now you're going above and beyond the traditional scope, right? So if astrology and mathematics are both influenced by Saturn, that's why when we deal with astrology, it is mathematics. It's still dealing with equations. It's just a different set of symbols. Same equations, different set of symbols. Same equations, different symbols. So the same mathematical method you will follow breaking down traditional geometry, algebra, calculus, so on and so forth. We're doing the same thing here. So when we are activating or applying astrology, this is, you can say, the on the level of calculus, linear algebra, statistics, probability. These are the highest levels of mathematics. It's just a different set of symbols. So if you can understand astrology, then you can understand traditional mathematics. If you can understand traditional mathematics, you can understand astrology. It just requires you to access a different part of the brain. So you can say Capricorn is more left brain, whereas the Aquarius is the right brain, because you have to tap into the creative world. Because you see, astrology allows us to be creative. It's not just one way to arrive at conclusions. Whereas, as we know, the left is about being right and exact. So there isn't really much room for creativity. Let me actually move this. So when we are dealing with Capricorn, there is not much room for creativity because things need to be right and exact. However, with Aquarius, we have a little wiggle room. So you still have to be precise, but you can be approximate. That's why we can listen to different astrologers have different perspectives on the same equations. That is the creative principle that astrology allows. So although we will be talking about the same principles, so you can say anybody who's talking about, they could say the moon in Aries, everybody would essentially be saying the same thing, but we don't have to follow the same mathematical method to arrive at the conclusions. So that's why, different astrologers have different ways of arriving at the same conclusion. So essentially, I'm just using one way to arrive at a conclusion. Everybody doesn't use the Kabbalah. Everybody doesn't use tarot. Every astrologer is not a tarot reader. Every astrologer is not a Kabbalist, right? These are just things I know, so I mix it all in. However, you can arrive at conclusions without the Kabbalah, without the tarot, without numerology, just by knowing the planetary symbols and the symbols of the zodiac, right? Dealing with the aspects, the houses, so on and so forth. So there are many different ways to arrive at conclusions because of the creative force of astrology or the creative force of Aquarius. So that's why when we say we are in the new age of Aquarius, this is what it actually means. New age of Aquarius is really speaking about the creative method of arriving at conclusions. So when we are speaking about the age of Aquarius, it's about becoming more creative to arrive at conclusions. So when you are able to be more creative to arrive at conclusions, you are able to arrive at unique conclusions that we may not have been able to arrive at strictly utilizing the left brain. However, we understand we must utilize the left and the right brain. So although we have creative wiggle room when it comes to astrology, we cannot negate the left brain, because the left brain more so takes us to what is called astronomy. So we want to understand astronomy. Now we have to go to Capricorn. So astrology right here is Aquarius. However, astronomy is Capricorn. And as we know, or as we should know, in the older days of astrology, you learned not just astrology, but also astronomy. You learned them together, even though we know nowadays they are separate. So the mainstream or the world will accept astronomy, but not so much astrology. That, you can say, is restricted to people that's more so off the grid or more creative in their thinking. However, if you come with astronomy, that right and exactness, then it's going to be a harder time proving you wrong. So that's why I encourage all astrologers, you must enhance your abilities with astronomy. Because when you back your astrology with astronomy, people will have a harder time just dismissing you. It's easy to dismiss astrology and horoscopes because of the creative method. Because that's what they say. Well, it's not following the mathematical procedure. It's not following the scientific method. But they don't say that about astronomy. So when you combine the two, again, which is the energy of Saturn, because Saturn is the mathematics of astronomy, as well as the mathematics of astrology, which is all occurring, as we know, in the three, dealing with Bina. So for the next 2 weeks, we are encouraged to enhance our mathematical understanding of the creative method as well as the scientific method, to enhance our Aquarian abilities, but also our Capricorn abilities or Capricornus abilities. We must enhance the right and the left brain. So when we go back to the moon as well as the sun being in Aquarius, because they're conjunct, not Aquarius, Aries. So sun and the moon conjunct in Aries, 11 degrees. We know that double one is the sun, but because it's a double one, it becomes a lunar sun. 1 plus 1 gives us 2. Now it becomes a lunar sun. So when it comes to the new moon, the sun and the moon are being charged by a lunar sun due to the 11. And we also know the 11 is a master number, dealing with the master seer. The master seer is the one who puts their intuition and imagination over their, you can say, their mathematical method. As Einstein once said, intuition is more potent or more powerful than anything we do, with pen and paper. So intuition is supreme and imagination is supreme. So as long as you have intuition and imagination, which is also dealing with Saturn, because Saturn is the visionary. Saturn is a visionary because Saturn can see into the future, which is a Aquarian aspect. So due to the Aquarian aspect of Saturn, Saturn can see into the future because that is an attribute of Aquarius. But what method does Saturn use to see into the future? They use the Capricorn right and exactness. So we just put R and E for right and exactness. So now we are utilizing both. And we can also dig into the past. Capricorn would also represent digging into the past. So not only are we able to go into the future, we are able to go into the past. And all this is happening within the world of Saturn, dealing with mathematics. So to be a visionary, to be a futuristic force, that is Aquarius. However, to dig into the past, the historic past, the ancient past, that represents the energies of Capricorn, dealing with right and exactness, dealing with the earth element. Let's take it a step further. So that is essentially the breakdown of what the sun and moon in Aquarius, not Aquarius, I keep saying Aquarius, Aries. So let's actually deal with the energy of Aries, because we dealt with Aquarius, we dealt with Capricorn, and we dealt with Saturn. So now let's deal with Aries of 11 degrees. 11 degrees Aries. Aries, as we know, deals with the first house, dealing with your persona, personality, environment. Persona, personality, environment. 11 degrees. 1 plus 1 is 2, which we know takes you to the energy of the moon. And of course the 2 ones, that's the double sun. The sun deals with the 5th house. The moon deals with the 4th house. The 4th house is the subconscious. 5th house, house of pleasure. It's kind of close. Make that a bit smaller. There we go. Pleasure derived from the subconscious or the right brain. Right brain or the feminine principle. It is feminine because it represents your anima or animus. Animus, anima, which is your magical self. All right. What's up, Becca? Salute to you. Peace, peace, peace. 93, 93, 93. All right. So, because we're dealing with the 1, the double 1, and the 2, or the sun and the moon, the 4th and the 5th house, combining to the 1st house. So now we have pleasure of the subconscious, which is the feminine principle, which is going into your emotional currency. Emotional currency, which represents your reactions So, because we're dealing with pleasure, it becomes pleasurable reactions. Pleasurable reactions. What causes you to have pleasurable reactions? Because that is dealing with your emotional currency. So, for these next 2 weeks, it is for you to search and discover what causes you to have pleasurable reactions. What causes pleasure to your own emotional currency? What causes pleasure to your subconscious? Because that connects you to your anima or animus, depending on if you're a man or a woman. Every man has an anima, every woman has an animus, which represents the magical self. So pleasurable reactions, 93, 93, 93, Cali. All praises due to the great mother, as we know. Much love, much energy, best wishes to you. You already know. So whatever causes you to have pleasurable reactions enhances your emotional currency, which takes you deeper into the feminine principle, or the 11, which is the master seer. So to connect with the master seer, we have to connect with the feminine principle, which is our magical self. And because Aries deals with the first house, all of this is occurring within this chamber. Mainly your environment, and this includes your head space. So your environment is not just your immediate environment, it also represents your head space, as Aries represents the head in medical astrology. So your head space is a part of your environment. And this is what causes your personality to be what it is in your persona, which represents your mask, the mask you put on. And the personality, again, just deals with not your sun sign, but rather your ascendant. So as we know, it's the AS. So your personality is your ascendant, or your rising sign, for people who want to be technical, your rising sign. So we're dealing with the rising sign versus the actual sun sign, because your rising sign determines your first house. So if we want to truly understand the first house, we must discover or explore our rising sign, which more so controls our head space. If you're able to control your head space, you're able to manipulate your environment properly, so that you can have those pleasurable reactions and tap into your magical self or your emotional currency by tapping into that 11 or that master seer. All right. So hopefully all that makes sense. And that's why I wanted to illustrate all this, because me trying to say all this without writing it out would be that absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully this is making it easier to understand these concepts. All right, cool. Now, because I have the chart right here open, what we also notice is Mercury is a part of this equation. So what I mean by that is the sun and the moon were both in 11 degrees Aries. However, Mercury was in 9 degrees Aries. So that means Mercury is also conjunct with the sun and the moon. So now we have a triple combination of the moon, the sun, and Mercury, all expressing themselves in Aries. One is 9 degrees while the others are 11 degrees. All right? Okay. We understand the 9 takes us to Mars, which is a planet of energy, and our willpower, ambition, otherwise known as the solar plexus. All right? We understand Mercury is the messenger of the zodiac. The messenger. So we have the messenger communicating with Aries, or at the first house, as we know, the head space. And the head space is being influenced by the solar plexus. So what does it mean when the head space is being influenced by the solar plexus? So that means your head space is occupied with these things currently. So your energy, your willpower, and your ambition are being influenced by the energy of the moon, the sun, and Mercury. Mercury is giving out the message that we need to enhance the solar plexus, right? Which is our inner sun. So let me just put that. Your solar plexus represents your inner sun. So when I say the lunar sun, you can say that is the equivalent to the inner sun of the solar plexus. Because our solar plexus is how we detect spirits. For those who are sensitive enough, we understand when we are around spirits, it causes a coldness in the solar plexus. So the more sensitive your solar plexus is, the more you can detect spiritual phenomenon. So we can just say spirits here. You can detect the coldness of spirits via the solar plexus, and I have verified this myself, so I know this to be true. So Mercury as the messenger, tapping us into the energy of Mars, taps us into the solar plexus, which is how we can better detect spirits or spiritual phenomenon. So to be the master seer or the 11 requires you to be sensitive enough to detect spirits and spiritual phenomena. So I'll just say spiritual phenomena. Spiritual influence, phenomena, activity, spiritual influence, activity, so on and so forth. So this becomes possible via the solar plexus or our inner sun. So when you are able to detect your spiritual influence and your spiritual activities via your inner sun, this will enhance your energy, your willpower, and your ambition, which, as we know, represents the Lima. The Lima, knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, as we call the higher self. The sun represents the source. So we have the messenger, we have the source, and again, we have the moon, which is the subconscious, or again, the anima or animus. Anima, animus. Messenger or messages from the anima or animus, which is connected to your source. So in order to connect to the source, the medium we use is the anima or the magical self. To connect to your source, your magical self represents the medium. So that the messages can be communicated. So messenger of source, or as we call the divine. And the divine is operating through the lunar light. Messages from the divine being filtered through the lunar light, which is why it is necessary to become a master seer. That's why the number 11 is the first of the master numbers. So the very first level is to detect spiritual influence, but before you become the 22 degree, the 33, or the 44. So before you do any of these things, you must master the intuitive or the feminine principle, your inner sun, your lunar light, to be able to detect your lunar light. What's up, Johannes? Salute to you. Let me actually move this out the way so we can see everything. So there we go. So we see how, even though these equations appear to be simple on the surface, sun and moon conjunct Aries and include Mercury, you see once we begin to open up Pandora's box, we begin to see the full story. So let me go ahead and erase all these, and let's go to the final piece here. Because again, we don't want to take too long doing a bunch of equations. And we'll get to the current events. All right. Give me a second. Let me put the webcam. There we go. Okay. So as I said, I'm just taking a little extra time to illustrate instead of just run my mouth. Let me illustrate so that you see the picture becomes very clear once it's illustrated. So even though we're talking about advanced things, because it's illustrated, it makes it a lot more digestible. Imagine me just saying all this stuff with my words and not illustrating it. It'd probably be a little bit more confusing, but it shouldn't be confusing. Same thing with mathematics. Once we learn the mathematical method, it's not as confusing as it appears on the surface, right? So that's pretty much what's going on with the new moon, and that's pretty much that's more detailed than you're going to get from many people. They're not going that deep into it, nor do they have to. Again, this is just because of the way my mind works. So this is not necessary. Other people will come to different conclusions, and they are all valid as long as they are adhering to the mathematical method. Right? So we're going to arrive at the same conclusions as long as we are adhering to the laws of astrology and astronomy, right? So the astronomy essentially gives us the fixed stars, which gives us more. Yeah, so we're gonna take it three levels deep. I normally don't go this deep, but we might as well. Let's just go ahead and go deep. So let's go to the fixed stars. So now we dealt with the planetary energies. Now let's see what's going on with the fixed stars. So if I tap on the fixed stars here, so let me actually. All right. So the sun has a parallel with Personian. So sun has a parallel, which is the equivalent to a conjunction, with Personian. If we understand Personian, the spiritual attributes of Personian or Personian, so many ways to say these words. This represents protection, specifically against witchcraft. It also gives favor of spirits and humans. It also preserves the health. So these are the extra attributes of the sun, as we know is in Aries, 11 degrees, conjunct with the moon and Mercury at 9 degrees. So the sun having a parallel with Personian gives extra attributes of making it a favorable time to work with spirits and humans. It also is a time to amplify your protections, and it's a good time to work on your health. All these are attributes of the fixed star, which we normally don't deal with whatsoever. It has the nature of Mars and Mercury. Mars, Mercury, as every fixed star is a combination of two planets. Fixed star, they all are basically two planetary combinations. Two planetary combinations. So every time you're dealing with a fixed star, they will have the attributes of two planets. So we're dealing with Mars. We know Mars deals with the first house as well as the eighth house traditionally. So the first and the eighth house is Mars. Then Mercury is the third and the sixth. All right. The third, fields of study. 6, self-improvement. 8th house, sexuality. And of course, first house, as we already explained, your environment. All right. So because Personian has the attributes of Mars and Mercury, this takes us to the third house, the sixth house, the first house, and the eighth house. So we can see why it helps you preserve the health, because it takes us to the sixth house. We can see why it protects against witchcraft because it takes us to the 8th house of mysticism. So I put that sexuality, but also mysticism. We also understand why it gives you favor with spirits and humans because it takes you to the 1st house, which is your persona. And that's what people respond to, as we know, with your image, the self-image. When you enhance your self-image, we understand people react to you differently, right? When your image is on point, right? So spirits as well as men and women will respond to you differently based on your 1st house. And of course, bringing all this together in the 3rd house, which represents communications or your fields of study. And we spoke about Mercury being the messenger. So the messenger of the true will, Mars, messenger of the true will. Of the true will. Your true will is just another way of saying your divine will. True will, divine will, same thing. All right. Now let's see what's going on with the moon. Let's see what aspects are occurring with the moon, if any at all. And we do. So let me erase this. So the moon, as we know, 11 degrees Aries, has a trine, which is a triangle, with Antares. Antares. Whenever we're dealing with a trine, this is easy flow energy, or basically, you could say easy flowing or without effort. So this is energy moving without effort. So this really requires no effort on your part, as a triune represents easy flowing energy that is harmonious. All right. So whenever we are dealing with the attributes of Antares, it helps with memory, understanding, or clarity, or clear vision. All right. This also helps you against evil spirits. So it's a evil spirit protection. So instead of protecting against witchcraft, this is protection against evil spirits. Or to bind them, if you're that type of person, if you want to bind evil spirits. So if you want protection against them or you want to bind them for your own personal uses, this is the energy of Antares, which has a energy, or the two planetary energies of Mars and Jupiter. Jupiter takes us to the 9th as well as the 12th traditionally, and we understand Mars takes us to the 1st and the 8th. So we see the 1st and the 8th came up again. Just put a star. The 12th house is the house of divination or karma. We understand the 9th house is the house of expansion. Eighth house, mysticism, sexuality. We can expand the 9th house to be religion, truth, philosophy, and all things foreign. Foreign cultures, foreign trade, foreign culture, foreign trade, all things foreign. And of course, we know the 1st house is the persona, or self-image. All right. So whenever we're dealing with Antares, remember the moon, magical currency. Aries, well, magical currency, master seer. Then Aries represents the archetypal image, or your archetypal image, or your divine image. Magical currency, master seer, divine image, directed towards mysticism and sexuality. They're one and the same, which will then lead you to expansion of your truth, your religion, your philosophy, because you are tapping into the arts of divination, which then dissolves your karma. Dissolve karma. We dissolve karma via divination. And divination is using the elements of the earth, like tarot cards, runes, so on and so forth, shells, any of these types of magical components, and tapping into what is called the psyche, as the 12th house represents the psyche, or the unconscious mind, or as we call the alter ego. So we utilize these tools to tap into the alter ego, which allows us to dissolve our karma, because we're tapping into the magical potency, the most magical. So the subconscious represents the magical currency, but the unconscious is the alter ego itself, which represents your shadow light. So this is how you can absorb shadow light, as we know deals with the energy of Lilith, or even Kali. And that's why they deal with the mysteries of Tantra. All right, there we go. So let me move this over so we can see the full picture here. All right. So we see every degree, every component requires a whole page of mysteries. All right. So hopefully everybody get it. So let me go ahead and move this out the way. So we're going ahead and take this off. Now let's get into some current events, now that we understand the astrology behind everything that's going on. So hopefully, by me breaking down all this, now we can understand what is occurring on the world stage. So I can move this. So let me take that off for now. Put my face back here. And let me pull up. I'm going to pull up Google News. So we just go down the list, see what's going on, and see if anything is relevant. So let's test also everything that we just did. Let's test it out and see if it explains anything that's actually going on in real time. So I'm going to pull up Google News, and I'll also put up Reddit. So give me a second. Let me type in these websites, and we'll go straight to it. Give me 1 second here. So Google News. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. One second. All right. Let me slim this down just a bit. And let me make sure y'all can still see the face here. There we go. Okay. So let's see what's going on here. So of course we don't have to go through all this stuff, but all the things that are interesting, I guess. So let's see. So one thing I did see that marijuana has just been decriminalized on a federal level. So as we know, basically ever since about 2017, you can say marijuana has been decriminalized in certain places or certain states. So basically, if you can have up to an ounce of marijuana and nothing happens to you on a state level. However, you could still be prosecuted on a federal level, even if the state laws you were perfectly legal, but you could still be prosecuted on a federal level. So they just finally passed it on a federal level that you can't be criminalized because you possess marijuana. So that's one of the biggest stories. Let me see if I can actually find the title here, because this was all over the place. So I'm sure I should be able to find this at some point. But even if I don't find it, that's actually what's going on here. So let me actually also go to Reddit. So let me do that as well. Let me go to Reddit. So anything that's not on Google News, we can go to Reddit. So let me go ahead and pull this up and see if we can find this news. Okay. So we're going to Reddit now. So I'm going to click on news. One second here. Let's see. Home news. Give me a second. See if I can find where the news is. Let's see. Here we are. News. It's a whole bunch of extras. Yeah, it's just not as easy as it seems. Alright, let me go to news. Here we go. Alright. Okay. One second. Alright, again, I don't want to waste nobody's time here. Again, this wasn't pre-recorded, so I'm actually not going to go through all these. I just remember off the top of my dome. So take my word for it until you actually do your own research. So yeah, we're not about to go through all this shit because it's madness in these news either. I haven't really been talking about current events because I'm just absolutely I'm done with all the madness in the news. Obviously, the so-called war is still going on in Russia. Not in Russia, but in Ukraine. However, Russia has never officially declared war on Ukraine. So this is why I see the politics in it. I see the politics in it because if Russia has never officially declared war on Ukraine, Russia calls it a special military operation. That's why Russia isn't just going full ham in in Ukraine, because Russia isn't officially at war with Ukraine. That has not came out of no mouth of any leader in Russia that they are actually at war. What's up, Keep Peace. So this is why we have to be very careful with the wording that's being used. Because you see in the West, over here in America, we will have every reason to believe that Russia is at war with Ukraine, but Russia doesn't say that it is at war with Ukraine. But what we do see is everybody else in NATO is giving Ukraine all of the weapons that they need and even the bodies that they need to fight the war out. Even though America is responsible for this madness because America is funding both sides. So honestly, if y'all want the absolute truth, I'm just kind of sickened because we are always in the middle of conflicts like this. Whether it's Afghanistan. You know, it's like we just find ourselves in the middle of madness, and we're funding both sides. Like America gave all the weaponry to the Taliban, so we funded the Taliban, just like we're funding Ukraine, just like we're funding Russia. So it's like we're just throwing money at all the wrong things. And I'm not here to say who's right, who's wrong, but I'm saying it just is very peculiar that American dollars is always in the middle of the madness, even if we speak about China and COVID, and the origins of COVID supposedly coming from labs in Wuhan. That was still funded by American dollars. That's why so many people don't like, Dr. Fauci, so on and so forth. So these things have all already been explained. I don't want to go too deep into that and get a fucking copyright strike over the shit. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. But I just find it very peculiar, once again, that all these things is funded by American dollars. Then we have to suffer as people, just like the Russian people have to suffer, the Ukrainian people have to suffer, and we're suffering because look at the gas prices. Look at the inflation. So everybody is being taxed. All because we want to fund war. Because this is what I see. This is my perspective. Because again, I'm fully aware of current events. I'm like, are we really funding it? Yeah. Biolabs in Ukraine. See, now I'm pushing it now. Looking, they may take the video down. See, if I start pushing too far in that direction, then it gets crazy. So it's a reason why I don't always go into that, because it's sickening that we're always in the middle of funding some disaster, some war, some virus, some disease. Like we're always manufacturing some type of weaponry. We're weaponizing the elements of nature. Somehow we're always weaponizing. It's the same thing with nuclear power. The future is about nuclear power. This is what I've been studying. I've been studying about nuclear power. Let me just take this shit off. Hold on. Because I know there's stupidness on that. I'm just going to take that off. So you see, it just changed my whole energy. Just looking at the news just put me in a whole different mood. I don't even want to put it on screen. That's just how ridiculous it is at this point. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Like literally, the one of the biggest stories, is somebody in Congress, a Republican, who's in the middle of orgies and drugs. We got time for shit like this. And if you are into current events, it's like who I'm talking about. I ain't about to name drop. But one of the lead Republicans is kind of being outed about he was involved in orgies and basically taking drugs. And basically Washington is responding like, no, that's nothing unusual in Washington, D.C. So basically they're saying if you're in Washington, D.C., you've probably been a part of a couple orgies and you probably did some drugs. So they're just not probably, they're basically normalizing it, which honestly, I don't have a fucking problem with it. I mean, if that's what you into, that's what you into. So it ain't me that has a problem with it. It's just like, okay, why is this an actual story? Like they're literally trying to destroy the man's whole image because he engaged in orgies and drugs. As we know, this shit happens every day in normal life. So whenever a politician tries to do something normal, because they're supposed to be so above normal, they're supposed to be so above average, they're supposed to be leading people, so they shouldn't be engaging in these things. So when they engage in normal activity, it becomes a thing. And I'm like, all right, whatever. In normal life, who the fuck cares? But they do. It makes for a good story and it puts money in people's pockets, whatever. Another thing that I've came into contact with is they're calling it digital drugs. I've been reading about digital drugs. They're basically calling binaural beats digital drugs. I literally just read a story about this earlier before I even went live stream. So basically, binaural beats that I have plenty of on this channel alone. I have binaural beats all over the fucking place. Isochronic tones, ASMR, I got all type of that shit. They're basically labeling it data drugs or digital drugs at this point. Not necessarily negatively. They're not saying that it's not necessarily negative, but basically they're saying that people are trying to replicate the psychedelic experience with binaural beats, isochronic tones, binaural tones, or monaural, all these various types of manipulating sound and frequency. They say that's basically the new drugs, as we will call cyber drugs. I will call it cyber drugs. But we see around here, We already been knowing that. Cause like I said the first videos I put on this channel was binaural beats. So before I even showed my face on YouTube, I had put my first videos with just strictly sound frequencies, and that was almost 10 years ago at this point. So you see, it's not nothing new per se. It's just catching up. The scientific community is now catching up to what has already been lingering on the internet for, as we see, about 10, 20 years at this point. But now they're just calling, oh, people are using this to recreationally to mimic the psychedelic experience. And I honestly can say what got me into binaural beats is because of that very same reason. But it wasn't purposefully. I didn't know that was going to happen. But I remember one day listening to binaural beats and I had this crazy ass dream. I ended up falling asleep. It wasn't on purpose, but I just ended up falling asleep. Then I realized, like, yo, I was on this. I still remember this dream to this day. It's ridiculous. I was on this big ass boat. I thought I was gonna drown. Like, it was all type of stuff. I'm like, wait, this is quite unusual. It was very vivid. I'm like, oh, this is more than just a dream. And I just so happened to fall asleep with these binaural beats. I'm like, oh, there must be something to this. And time again, I found that to be the case. Which is why I started to upload that type of content on my channel before I even started running my mouth about any of these things. So I had already proved that to be true. So that's why I came through the door on that time, because of that realization. And it was accidental. I didn't do it on purpose. I just so happened to fall asleep listening to it. I was trying to get a whole different experiment, or trying to conduct a whole different experiment. Just end up falling asleep, nodding off, taking a nap, and end up having that experience. I'm like, oh, there's a reason. Like, that wasn't just random. That was definitely because of the frequency that I was inputting into my system that was influencing my neurons, causing my neurons to take a different shape, a different pattern, and therefore cause the sensations, the internal sensations, or to manipulate the first eye to secrete the DMT from the pineal gland to cause that extreme visualization, dream, astral projection, whatever you want to call it. So we've already known this to be true for quite some time, but the scientific community is now catching up. So the gap is closing between spirituality and science, because for the longest we felt like they didn't have nothing to do with each other. Most spiritual people are not scientific. Most scientists are not spiritual. Those are like two different worlds. But it was done like that purposefully. That was done on purpose to split the personas, so we feel like we can't come together and come to a common denominator. But if we do, if more scientific people came around spiritual people, we would realize we're saying the same thing, we're just using a different language. Going back to the initial analysis of the difference between Capricorn and Aquarius. So if you consider yourself more spiritual, more New Age, you're more of an Aquarian. If you consider yourself, again, more of a traditionalist, you're more of the Capricorn. But they are both ruled by Saturn traditionally, and that's the point I'm making here. They actually connect. Instead of them being disconnected, they actually connect in the center. That center point, or that 0 point consciousness, is what connects them together, right? And another thing is, like, people made such a big deal about this whole Will Smith thing. And, like, I didn't even want to talk about that shit. And I'm not going to talk about it. Because I'm like, people are giving this so much energy. Like, I don't even want to talk about it. Like, it fucked my mood up. Like, I don't even want to make content. Because people going to want to hear what the fuck I got to say about this. And I didn't want no parts of it. So that's why you ain't seen me in a couple days. I didn't want no parts of that. Because I'm like, this is clearly a ritual. This is clearly something that's supposed to seep into the bowels of your subconscious, to the point where now you're in your home talking about what another man did on stage. Now we're talking about it in our homes. Now this energy is all in our own personal space, and it don't need to be that way. So, like, I don't want no parts. So I completely disconnected from that. So that's basically what has been one of the biggest stories. We already know what to slap. And again, we don't have to go. There's nothing to break down. Honestly, there's so much people, like even people that I didn't even think certain people would make content about that. I was seeing certain people that don't even deal with that making content. I'm like, all right, this is just getting ridiculous. So I didn't want no parts. And again, I don't even care to speak about that. The only thing I've learned in recent times is Will Smith has officially quit the Academy. So there was talks about, the Academy kicking him out because of his actions, but he actually resigned. So that's what he did today, hours ago at this point. So he resigned. So he is no longer a part of the academy, and he did so. He did so by his own free will. I'm sure he was pressured to do so, but now he is no longer a part. So you won't see him there ever again because he's no longer a part of it. So that's that. Even though people are going to continuously speak about that and all these things, it is what it is. So like I said, I don't want to give that too much energy. I don't want to give that too much position. Right. So like I said, like most of the time, or most news is revolving around the Russia or the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And there's so much fog of war. There's so much misinformation. Like no one's taking responsibility. Basically, Russia oil deposits just got bombed by helicopters or war machines. Then Ukraine is not even taking responsibility for it. So basically, so oil deposits just got blown up in Russia, and Ukraine is not taking, like, oh, we ain't do that. So I'm like, at this point, this is just fucking ridiculous. So now oil reserves have just been blown up, and now the enemy, the so-called enemy, is not even taking responsibility. No, we didn't do that. So either they did it and lied about it, or they're basically trying to say that Russia did it themselves. Like Russia is blowing up their own shit. And then they're going to blame it on Ukraine, and that's why they're going to keep it going. So they're going to destroy their own stuff, blame it on Ukraine. So it's either one. Either Ukraine it did it and lied, or Russia did it to themselves. And either way, I'm like when you have to go to these levels in war, either way it goes, I'm like, this is just ridiculous. So that's again, I just get a bad taste in my mouth when it gets to this point. Like, all right, so now we're doing shit like this. This is what we're doing now. Now we're playing super dirty. We can't even be civilized about this stuff. But this is what's been going on to the point where that's why I'm saying, like, I just disconnected to the point where I don't even want this in my conscience at this point, because it's just getting absolutely ridiculous. Because now it becomes a ritual. Every morning we got to hear about this shit, and we got to hear about how they're playing tricks against each other. They're playing real dirty. They playing real slimy with each other, and it's just going to get worse, honestly. And because we're in the middle of all of it, funding the shit, so we're going to perpetuate it. We're going to keep it going, and other nations are going to keep it going because they're going to continue to buy oil from Russia. And now the U.S. is trying to not big up, but trying to put pressure on India because India is not adhering to the sanctions on Russia. So Russia's India is basically superseding the sanctions on Russia. So now America is trying to step in. Oh, there would be consequences if you continue to supersede these sanctions. So I'm like, all right, this is what we're doing now. This is what we're doing. Also, they're going to end Title 42 in May. So starting in May, Title 42 will be over, which is basically, this is why a lot of immigrants are not allowed into the country. They send you back to wherever you came from. So if you're in Mexico, you're trying to cross the border, you get caught, they send you back to Mexico. That's Title 42. Once Title 42 is removed, however, now that allows the people to stay here. So they can put you can say, in a jail here or a holding cell. They can process you, but then they can release you in America instead of taking you back to Mexico. So, of course, a lot of Republicans is in their feelings about that, because that completely changes the dynamics of the border. So if everybody getting caught is released into America, you're basically becoming an American citizen without any resistance. So of course the Republicans isn't necessarily feeling that. But the Democrats, they're all with it, because there's two different agendas. The Democrats are clearly about including everybody. So that's why we're bringing refugees from Ukraine. We brought refugees from Afghanistan, and we're going to continue to bring refugees because the Democrats is all about bringing new people here so that they can get your votes. Because in those people's minds, they're in America because of the Democrats, not because of the Republicans. So they're probably not going to vote Republican when it comes time to vote, because Republicans oppose them actually being here. So that increases the Democratic vote, because the Democrats can say you're here because of us. Even though we had all this resistance with the Republicans, you're still here because of us. You're here because of the rules we set down. And in all honesty, they're right. So that's why the Democrats don't mind new people coming into the country, because that represents more votes for them, as opposed to the Republicans basically targeting the nationals, basically people that are pro-American. The Republicans basically have those types of people on their side, but the Democrats, who wants to include everybody, they're not dealing with race and shade and all these things, or at least on the surface. Then, because they want so this is basically how they obtain their power. And the Republicans obtain their power because they appeal to the nationalists, those who are pro-American, American first, basically. So anybody who has an American first mentality, you probably, deal with the Republicans. Anybody who has, let's bring a new group of people here and change the dynamics by changing the people, then you're probably in the Democratic perspective. And again, I'm not here to say who's right, who's wrong. I just see that both sides play dirty tricks with each other. So honestly, I don't respect either side, honestly. I agree with Democrats on some points, I agree with Republicans on some points, but they both engage in stupidness. So it's like I don't care about either one of them, because of the levels, the low levels that they stoop to, just going to war with each other. It's like I'm not with any of that. It doesn't feel right in my spirit. I don't even like talking about this stuff. But again, this is current events. This is what's going on. This is what's been going on, and we're going to continue to perpetuate it. They're going to continue to hit us with these rituals. Keep this in your subconscious so that you can be pro-Ukraine. Because most of the news, if you're in America, is pro-Ukraine. You don't have access to a lot of pro-Russian news, because they're just calling it propaganda. So any type of news Russia comes out with, it just automatically becomes propaganda, which I think is bullshit, because it's not all propaganda. Even if you say that a percentage of it is, but it ain't all propaganda. But you see, we don't get the opportunity to come to those conclusions on our own. Well, what's false and what's right? We don't even have the opportunity, because our media, American media, is just automatically pushes anything they say, anything they do, and they just push their own narratives. So again, we don't even have the opportunity to decode for ourselves. The media is basically decoding for us. And when the media is decoding for us, it becomes this bullshit stacked upon bullshit stacked upon bullshit. Because all of it isn't wrong. So now you got right information being turned wrong or misinformation. And we can honestly say where that leads us. Now, right information, 100% factual information, is getting termed as misinformation. You can see where that leads us. That doesn't lead us to a light place. That leads us to a very dark place. But that's the purpose of Joe Biden being the president, as Joe Biden is Rahu. Rahu, or the number 7. The body without a mind. That's what he represents on the celestial stage, the South Node. So he's like a walking zombie at this point. So he's not the one writing anything. He has a team. The Biden presidency is, of course, more than the president. So he has a team that's doing all that technical analysis. He's not doing any of the technical analysis. He's more so just the face or the body. So he's not even the brains of the operation. He's the body. He's just a symbol. So Joe Biden is purely symbolic at this point. He's definitely not the brains of any operation. You know why I know it? Because I did my thorough information on this president, and I'm not even going to, the type of stuff I figured out is fucking ridiculous. I'm not even going to reveal that on here. I've been doing my studies on this person. Because just look at his first wife. I'm not going to go no deeper than that. His first wife. She was called the brains of his operation when he was becoming a senator. And that's back in the 70s. So if his first wife, who died in a car accident along with his daughter, and the surviving two was his Hunter Biden and Joseph. Joseph died from cancer in 2015, 1 year before he was supposed to become the governor of Delaware. Imagine that. In 2014, he was an attorney. I'm talking about Joseph, the other son of Joe Biden, from his first wife. Just like Hunter Biden is also from his first wife. So his first son was an attorney general. In 2014, he announced that he will be running for governor in the 2016 election. 2015, he dies. Coincidence? Who knows? And I'm not even going to get into the conspiracy theories. I'm just here to present the facts, and you make the conclusion on yourself. or by yourself. You come to your ultimate conclusion as to what you think that means. So I've been doing my thorough research, and it's madness, right? So it's very peculiar that both of Joe Biden's sons is in controversy. What do I mean? Because the reason why Joe Biden's first son stopped being an attorney general because he represented somebody in royalty who R-word their own daughter, who was 3 years old at the time. Joe Biden's son represented that man who committed that act and got them off to the point where they didn't do no jail time. No jail time. So you R-word a 3-year-old girl, which is your own daughter, came from your own ball sack. You violate her, do no jail time. Something that, the average person would have got thrown under the jail, but this person was able to do no jail time because they were a part of royalty in one of the royal families of Delaware. They're still there. Again, I'm not saying any names because, again, they'll find any reason to snatch this shit down. I'm already borderline saying too much as is, but I'm not going to go too far. And again, we'll just be here a couple more minutes. I'm just giving y'all insight. I've been doing my research, and it's very disgusting. Then, of course, we see what happened with Hunter Biden's laptop. So why is both of Joe Biden's son into some craziness? They both were into craziness. And he said he focused exclusively on his sons after his first wife and his daughter. Because Joe Biden also had a first daughter. He has another daughter with his current wife. But he had his first wife and his first daughter both died in a car accident. Hunter Biden and Joseph, they were both in that car, but they survived. So the two sons survived and the women died. Peculiar? Who knows? So both of the sons survived, but both of the women died. And his first wife was known as the brains of his operations, to the point where he became senator while he was at the hospital with his family going through all that trauma. That's when he became senator. So basically, after he lost his first wife is when he became senator. Peculiar. You come to your own conclusion. But like I said, I've been doing my research because I know that ain't nobody else gonna do it. Want to know something else I found out? The reason why Joe Biden is all about NATO, because NATO was established 72 years ago. How old is Joe Biden? 79. So there's a 7-year gap between NATO being created and Joe Biden being born. There's 7. That's 7 again. Not Kether. I don't know why I'm thinking about Kether. K2, which is the number 7, or the South Node once again. Right? So again, I'm coming to unique conclusions that you're not going to hear nowhere else. But again, I didn't enjoy this process. This wasn't an enjoyable process. But I'm like, all right, if you really want to know what's going on, you got to do the thorough research. Because you ain't going to get it from the news. You're not going to get it from the media. You got to actually go back and become a historian at this point. So that's why Joe Biden is all about NATO, because that's his whole agenda is NATO. Because of the time he was born. So that's why he is the president, because he was selected as president to push NATO. Because we know Trump was not pushing NATO. So if Trump had remained president, we would not be a part of NATO right now. And we would not be in this conflict right now. And everybody knows that. I say that because Hunter Biden, he is the link that connects all this. Why? Because Hunter Biden was in Ukraine, getting paid from Ukraine. He was also getting paid from Russia, and he was getting paid from China. All of these 3 powerhouses, Russia, China, Ukraine, what do they all have in common? Hunter Biden. They funded him while Joe Biden was the vice president under Obama. So he was in Ukraine setting up what's going on now. He was in Russia setting up what's going on now. And he was in China setting up what's going on now. Imagine that. So is all this happening? Is it really just a coincidence? It seems like this has been planned for a very long time. And they're just executing the same way they say George Bush basically continued what his father laid down, which is George Bush Sr. What George Bush Sr. started, George Bush ended. when we went to war in 2001. So we can say, okay, it's because of the Twin Towers and all that, but it's very peculiar that his father was trying to do the same thing, but he was unable to complete the mission. His son had to come and complete that mission, but things were already in play before 2001, before the Twin Towers were attacked. We were already trying to get up in Afghanistan for other reasons, the real reasons basically, and it got completed with George Bush. That's how we actually got in there. But they had been trying to do that. I'm getting my tongue twisted because I don't even want to talk about this stuff because we know it's just the littlest thing. Boom, whole video deleted, and it's all facts though. I ain't said one lie, but you don't have to lie. That's the whole thing. It's like I actually would be further if I lied. Imagine that. Imagine if I was spewing a bunch of lies, I would be a lot further. So those are the type of adversities I have to overcome. So anyway, so hopefully you enjoy the history. I ain't even gonna go no further than that. So this is I'm just giving you the foundational pieces for you to do further research, so that you understand, like, oh, this isn't just coincidental. This isn't as random as they want you to believe. This has actually been occurring since really Obama. And if we do our historical references, we will see that to be absolute fact. So with that, I bear peace. Hopefully I gave everybody a deeper insight so you get out your feelings about this shit. Get out your feelings. If you're in your feelings, get out your feelings. This is all planned. None of this is random. It just appears to be that way. So if you're in your feelings about any of these things, don't be. Focus on those new moon rituals that we spoke about earlier. And get your mind right, get your head space right, get your environment right, and move forward. And with that, I bear peace. 93, 93, 93.